So just checking that sound is working. So just checking that sound is working. Okay, good. So sound's working, everything seems to be working. Hello and welcome to this live stream. Why am I doing this live stream? Well, I actually got a message sent to me asking me a question of which is the trending technology for web developers currently. It was a little bit differently reworded, but so I thought I'd take the opportunity to answer this question just doing it live, because this is something that I know about, and yeah, so I thought I would talk about it. So if you're actually entering, then just write me a message and just say that you can hear me fine and everything is all right, just to let me know, and then I will chat. It's like that you stream. Okay, it says here that I should change my streaming rate to 45. There we go. So let's change that. Should be better now. Okay. Just see whether that changes. I don't want to stream this and then see that it doesn't work later, because I have actually done that before. I've done like an hour's streaming to find out I didn't even have the microphone plugged in. Okay, so step number one of being a web developer. In my opinion, if you got up today and said, I want to be a web developer with zero experience, what is the first thing that I need to learn? So just out of interest, I've just been eating some crisps. I'm just checking whether I got any crisps around my mouth. What is the first thing that you should learn before starting to be a developer? Well, in my opinion, it's Git. And it's about how you can version your code, because in the beginning, as a beginner dummy developer, you make 1,000 mistakes per line or per 5 minutes. So it's really important that you can actually manage to be able to version this code, and then you can even always fall back to the code that you had already, and you can put it on different branches. So to answer the question is, first of all, you should be learning how to use that you should use Git. Anyway, the second thing which I think which you should learn how to develop today is JavaScript. Right? Forget about Java or Swift or C, C++, all of these other things first of all. Go ahead and spend a good few weeks just getting yourself aware of how important JavaScript is, and also how important JavaScript was. In order to understand where JavaScript came from and why it's just infiltrated the web today, gives you a better knowledge of why you should use JavaScript. Also, it's most important to learn what's the difference between vanilla JavaScript and other types of JavaScript today. Now, there's lots of different technologies like React, Angular, React Native, NativeScript. I don't want to say this horrible word, Vue, that all use, well, most of them use TypeScript, and TypeScript just adds all of those niceties that come with all Swift, Android, Java, Kotlin, C#, and so on. You know, this static typing where you've essentially you're forcing yourself to write clean code. So moving on to that, so now once you've decided that you've got to learn about how to use JavaScript, don't just jump straight into TypeScript, because with TypeScript you've got to learn a few other things. You've got to learn about how Node works and Node Package Manager. It's a bit too much. With learning JavaScript in the beginning, so we're talking about in the first couple of weeks, just learning about JavaScript and what it does, etc. Parallel to this, you've obviously got to learn about the normal elements of programming. So you've got to go and buy yourself a book that teaches you the basics of programming, or look on YouTube and you'll find an infinity of videos teaching you about how to program. Once you have this concept of learning how to program, then it doesn't really matter in which direction you go. You can pretty much choose any direction you want, but you've got to decide how do you want to program mobile applications, as in with Swift and Kotlin or C# or whatever it is, with native code? Or do you want to create progressive web apps with the likes of TypeScript, React, Angular, and so on, and any other frameworks that are available? Or do you want to be like a responsive web developer that takes code and HTML and CS from other people, that they've just done it hard and fast, and then you make it all responsive? So you still need a good knowledge of how to program in JavaScript. You also need a fantastic knowledge in CSS, and also you need a good knowledge in Node, NPM, and all the different helper packages that you can use to optimize how the website looks on mobile application, whole bunch of plugins with Chrome, Internet Explorer, Edge. You've got to be all over it. I mean, you've got to be over it like a rash to be a responsive web developer. And I have the patience for like Swift and so on to create mobile apps, to sit there and to work out why something isn't working. But so to answer the question, which is the trending technology for web developers today, I believe that it's React. And if you put a whole bunch of developers in a room, they'll pretty much all say that they know how to use React, or they've done a little bit of React programming. So if you're uncertain of what React is, then where's my other one here? So let's change over to a browser and let's Google this. And okay, so as you can see here, React, a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. It's created by, if you don't know this, then I'm guessing you've just entered the development world, which is fine, right? But this is the right direction now to understand that your aim is to use React. And if you can jump straight into React, there's really good documentation for it. So I like React because it's very functional. And why does it make that good? Because it's functional. Because things can be tested. You know, you can write one piece of code and it gets tested. And it gets tested, and so you start to write automatically optimized code, because you've taken a big problem and you've reduced it down into smaller parts, and then you're able to literally do a pure functional test on this one components and function and test it, which means that you've removed any likes of bugs inside of this one component. And then when you use a bigger component built up of lots of smaller components, you can then test this, and you know that all of the smaller ones are already tested. So, and React it's all about this style of programming at the moment, which in my opinion is the future of web development. It's the next couple of years. It's not the silver bullet, because probably Facebook will create something again in 12 months, and we'll then be talking about, hey, well, that is now the that is now the newest thing that you're going to do. But so the most important thing is to note here is that if you're a new developer, you should really be looking at reading the documentation to React. At least do yourself that favor and look at the documentation. It's not that long. I think it even tells you how long you need. No, okay, well, it's not that long. I've read the documentation in an hour or so from start to finish, and it's enough for you to get a real good understanding of what React does. So if you get to React and you're like, no, this is not good for me, then as a beginner, then where can you go from there? Okay, well, I would advise all beginners to go to YouTube first of all. Otherwise, if you're more of a reading type of person, or if you're more of a reading type of person, then I will fully advise you to always go to w3schools.com. Come here and they have a whole bunch of different examples of how to do a whole bunch of things, and especially JavaScript. And here, if you spend hour plus looking at all of the different types of tutorials, pages that they've got about JavaScript, and you practice them, you should now have a good understanding to then move back to React to give it another go, if you understand what I mean. And if you still don't understand React, but you understand the programming, one second. This is a programming video. It's a bit slow, this. Okay, so I've just got a message saying about, because it's a Borussia Dortmund one, but just to indicate this is a programming video, and I was kind of thinking about doing a Borussia Dortmund video prior to them playing on Friday in Cologne. So anyway, I'm gonna decide about whether I do a Borussia Dortmund video, probably maybe at 6 o'clock this evening, if I'm gonna do it. But anyway, so let's go back to the programming side of it. But I'm more than happy to answer questions here, because this is just a live stream and there's no rules in this. Okay, so let's say you're a beginner, you've been to React, and you didn't understand it, so you went to W3 Schools and you then read all of the JavaScript documentation, you did a whole bunch of practice on it, and you're like, wait a minute, I understand functions, anonymous functions, and this, that, and the other now a little bit better. So I'll go back to React, and then if you still don't quite get it, go to watch the YouTube videos to see how other people have done it or how they're doing it, and that will give you a better understanding of why. Now, React loves Redux, and I must admit that I'm not really a user of Redux, but Redux is possibly, for a beginner, it's possibly too much. And if you've gone in the steps that I've just said, where you've gone from not understanding React, then gone to JavaScript, and then gone back to React, if you then step onto Redux and you're still not totally sure about it, I don't think you'll understand it. But Redux is definitely on your list of to-dos. It's not a total priority, but it should be something that you really think about. Okay, so talk about Borussia Dortmund. I'm a massive Jadon Sancho fan, and I've since the beginning, when he first got signed from Man City, I looked at it in the news. I saw him with Mikhail Tork, and that they'd signed him, and thought, this is fantastic. An English boy, because at the time he was a boy, in the main team. And I always believed in him, and not many other fans in the beginning quite knew about him. And then over time he got better and better, and then boom, he just got awesome. And I think Lucien Favre is the person that has made him absolutely legendary. And he's only 19. So anyway, back to the programming. Redux. So definitely put it on your list of to-dos, but don't kind of depend upon it. Okay, so Redux is all about state, and this concept is very functional. That if you have lots of components, they have like states. Now, if we say a login box has a state of a username and a password, well, this is like what it is required to have in the beginning, and then it sends off some form of authentication, and it'll only send this off when it has a valid email, and it also has a it will only send this off once it has a valid email and also a valid password. So in the beginning it has the state of nothing, but it requires the state to be an email of a string, of a valid email, and a password, say like minimum length of 6 with an uppercase and lowercase, a digit and symbol, and whatever it may be. And once the state of this component is fulfilled, then the button that allows you to submit that data, that changes its own state of enabled or disabled. So the button state is reliant upon the state of the overall component. And so this is about state, and what you should have is that state should be like a case of it should be completely immutable all the time, meaning that if you take a state with an email but no password, you shouldn't mutate this state directly. What you should do is you should have a function that takes the old states, takes the new properties that it wants to be updated, then create a new object, assign all of those properties to that, and then return this new object. And then you should set the states with your new state. This is meaning that there's no like object references or anything like that. You're always getting a completely new, you're not getting copy, you're completely updating the states, which means any other references down below, they're just null and void anymore. And then you have a function that updates the way that your view is rendered, it looks. And this is basically how React works, and it's how many other progressive web app technologies today work, about just always updating, always rendering your view and trying to render as minimal parts as possible. So so in theory today you've got to be able to understand, in today's technology, what the document object model is, and also what this shadow document object model is, because React and Angular and other ones, what they'll do is they'll make a copy of the DOM, and when you get new states, they'll check through the states whether it matches anything and whether there's any change. And if there's no change, it won't update the DOM. But if it has got an update, it will cleverly only update it will try and update the smallest element as possible. So it won't like re-render the whole box or something. It will just try as hard as possible just to update one small little bit that has no side effects on anything else. This is very clever, and yeah, I think you've really got to look into state-driven. Am I just making this up? State-driven programming. I don't think so. State-driven. No, I didn't make it up. All right, so state-driven programming. Do we get anything here? All right, we're not. So maybe event-driven. As event-driven, state-driven. So this is really something that you should look into learning about as well. Now, we then want to talk about, you've got to understand in today's world what HTTP is, and you've got to understand it. I don't care about anyone make any excuses. If you want to be a developer today, and it's not just about creating something that doesn't require the internet at all, then you must learn how to use HTTP. Full stop, exclamation mark, whatever it is you want to say. Now, so HTTP is the fundamental concrete part, the building blocks of the web. And you've got to understand what's the difference between a GET request, a POST request, PUT request, delete, patch, etc. You have to understand what REST is. Why would you do like a REST API? These are key words. I don't want to get into it now, but fundamental thing. You go to a job interview to be a web developer. If you don't know what REST is and you don't know how it works, just turn around and leave, right? Because I don't think you even deserve to have that interview. I want to kind of get back to the question. What is the trending technology for web developers currently? Okay, well, the trending technology, to reiterate this for any other people that's rejoined, in my opinion, is step one, you've got to learn Git. You've got to learn how to version your code. Step two is, if you don't know how to program, you've got to learn the fundamentals of what programming is. Variables, etc. Primitive types, not getting into it, the basic fundamentals of what programming is. I believe the best place to do this is with JavaScript. Learn how to use JavaScript, and once you've got a good fundamental knowledge of programming and also JavaScript, then I would advise place number one, first place, is go to React and read the documentation for React. And if you don't understand that, go back to JavaScript, go to YouTube, and then go back to React. Once you've done this, then check out Redux. And Redux, so we've got React here. If you've just joined, we've got React here. And if you don't understand that, go to w3schools.com and then check out JavaScript. And then once you've done all this, then go and read the documentation about Redux. So, and then go and check out how to do state-driven programming, if that's even something. Next piece of technology, which is an absolute must. Well, let me put Git here, first of all. We'll just put Git as in Wikipedia, and we'll put that at the beginning. So the next thing that I believe is a total must. Oh, HTTP it was. So it was yeah, that's a good piece of, yeah, that will be good enough. Okay, we're on to states, Redux. Okay, the next thing is Node. So once you have a good understanding of JavaScript, then you can start using Node. Now, if you're not like a terminal person and you don't like command lines, I would say this is the next thing actually. So it's learning Bash. And why do I say learning Bash as well? Because nearly everything that you do with any servers or anything like that requires you to be able to understand Bash, or at least be able to run some scripts and files, download stuff, and so on. So Bash is the basics of Bash: change directory, touch a file, cat something, edit something. Just loads of basic commands. No, I don't think. Just buy Bash dummies or whatever. Just go onto YouTube and check out a whole bunch of simple Bash tutorials, really basic tutorials, and that'll be enough. As long as you don't have to use like the Explorer to move around the working directory and so on. As long as you can just like move, copy, create, update, edit, delete, or whatever, all of your files, and you know how to zip something, you know how to download something with it, then you have a good understanding. Because Git, in theory, to understand Git, you've got to understand Bash as well. So it kind of came in with Git, and I kind of think that you probably would have learnt that in the beginning with Git, but please don't avoid using the terminal. Don't avoid using it at all, because in my opinion, actually, the absolute #1 place of what developers should learn in today's technology is Bash and how to use the terminal. Right? If you can't do that, don't move on to the next step. And if anything, it's probably like a half an hour of your day to learn the basic commands, and learn these till you can literally just do them without thinking. So we're putting Bash at #1 now. I think today's technology to do web development, you've really to get the full optimization out of it, I think you should be using Linux, or at least Unix. So if you don't have the money for a Mac, then go buy a laptop. Now, you don't need to spend, to do web development, especially JavaScript development, you don't need to spend like €1,000, £1,000, $1,000, whatever it may be, on this top laptop. I get my laptop. Oops. Okay, so I worked on a computer for like 10 years at home, and I always updated my computer until to the point where I went, this ain't going to work anymore. So I had to go and invest in a new laptop, and I really don't like buying new laptops or computers, because you buy one and then the next month this new technology comes out and you're like, I didn't buy the correct piece of hardware or whatever, and now this new one's come out. So I waited and waited and waited until the price was relevant to the stuff that I wanted to have in it. And this was important to me, is that it wasn't about the money, it was about that I'm not overspending and I'm getting as much as that I should do. Anyway, enough chatting, David. So I got this, which I'm always, don't see my camera. So I've got this, which is an Acer laptop, and I'm working on a Mac Mini, the newest Mac Mini, the 2018 Mac Mini here. And this is my laptop for any other portable JavaScript stuff. And this is a Acer Aspire E15, and it has Intel Core i7 7500 with 2.7 gigahertz with turbo boost up to 3.5 gigahertz, Intel HD graphics, 8 gigabytes of DDR3L memory, 256 gigabytes of SSD hard drive, and it's fine. Put Ubuntu on this, works perfectly. You may ask, why do you only have 256 gigabytes of RAM of SSD? Yeah, because I have like other hard drives. I can use an external hard drive, and I'm running an external hard drive here, an SSD. I've got a normal HDD one, and I've got an SSD running on my Mac, an external one. One's for working, so I've got a 64 gigabyte Kingston, is it? I can't take it off because it's working right now. SanDisk. So I've got a 64 gigabyte SanDisk hard drive, which runs any like stuff that I'm doing, working on, programming, that goes on there. And once I'm finished with it, that gets saved onto the normal hard drive to get backed up. And any code is also then sent to GitHub to be saved there. So I've always got backup copies of it. Anyway, so Linux. Now this has like Windows, don't care, on it. And within about 5 minutes of having it, I put a USB stick in it and put Linux 18 something on it, Ubuntu, and I swear by Linux. I swear by Linux. It's so much faster than Windows, and yeah, there's a steep learning curve when you first use Windows, but you know, this is part of life. So let's come back to here, and we're going to put, we got Linux. Did we get Linux on there? No. So we're going to put Linux, Wikipedia. So let's put, yes, that's good. So we're going to put Linux, if anything, at the beginning. Yes. Want that one, David? We're going to put Linux at the beginning because Yeah, if you're gonna be, if you wake up and say I want to be a iOS developer, then you can still learn, but you have no experience in programming, then you can still learn about programming, because the JavaScript part is going to help you. The fact that you want to be an iOS developer, well, you want to have that. Now today with React Native allows you to create mobile applications using TypeScript or JavaScript. So if you sit in a job and you say, well, I just want to be a Swift developer and I just want to make iOS apps, and please don't say those horrible words like Objective-C, I don't want to hear it, then at one point you're going to have to learn how to do React Native, because someone's going to say, hey, we're going to do a project with React Native now, and you're going to have to understand JavaScript. So it's a key vital thing to understand. So now that we've got JavaScript, and okay, so the next thing on the list, effectively, if we've gone back to doing like state driven, then I'm going to say TypeScript now, because TypeScript yeah, so long story short is that Microsoft created TypeScript, or a guy at Microsoft created TypeScript so they could write cleaner code, or they could write cleaner JavaScript code. And you should check out videos on YouTube talking about TypeScript. It's very, very interesting. But like I said, it adds types to JavaScript. That's why it's called TypeScript. And it helps you to remove bugs from your code, which, if anything helps you to remove bugs from your code, then it's a fantastic thing. So this, in my opinion, once you've got a little bit more experience, and I possibly say like a couple of months now of learning about all these things, then move on to TypeScript. Now, when you get to TypeScript, you're going to be hit with this wall and going, wait a minute, you've got to learn Node. So in order for you to do that, you've got to then learn what Node.js is. Now, if you don't know what Node is, then Node is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome V8's JavaScript engine. There we go. So what does this mean? So browser, most browsers have the Chrome's V8 engine, or Google's V8 engine inside of it, that is creating the website, right? It's running all of the JavaScript and other stuff, blah, 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 in it. And so Node is built on top of this, and it runs on basically everything. No matter where you go, everything runs Node. So previously, where everyone used always Java to have then Java runtime, etc. on everything, Node just runs everywhere. So it means that you can utilize, so it means that other people can create packages that run on all platforms, and then they can create like these JavaScript helpers to then be converted. So you can just access all of this just in JavaScript. Node also comes with a whole bunch of platform-specific code that allows you to access the file system, streams, sockets, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then you've got Node Package Manager. So this, you've got to get Node installed. Now, prior to you going to the Node Package Manager, I would advise you to then have a checkout of NVM. And this is the Node Version Manager. Now, it can be at times that you're going to, where you can have one project that says you can only use Node 6, and another project that says you can only use Node 8. So that means you like, oh, I've got to change different versions of Node here. That's fine. You just use the Node version manager, and this will allow you to then switch between the different versions of Node. Yeah, and then this eradicates this problem. So Node version manager is also, in my opinion, a must, and it's really, really quick and easy to install. Once again, let's go back to point number one. You're going to have to learn Bash. And most of Bash is just copy paste and understanding what it is, but you shouldn't copy paste everything. Right? But once again, you see here that you're going to have to understand a little bit of what files are used in Linux. So that's why Linux was also at the beginning. So this is Node version manager. So once we've got Node and Node version manager, we can then start using TypeScript, which is good. So if you're going to start now, if you're using TypeScript to start actually creating something, you're now effectively on the React side. Yeah. Now, another thing that's going to pop up that another thing that's going to come up is that you're going to start thinking, how does that work? Why does it work like that? And this is Webpack. You're really going to need to learn what Webpack is as well, because Webpack allows you to, like when you created previously, when you created websites and so on. Oh, I didn't drink. When you created websites previously, you like created an index.html, a JavaScript folder, a CSS folder, images folder, and a whole bunch of other rubbish stuff. And then you had to manage it all by yourself and send it to the browser and stuff. And then you had CSS files that was huge, and they were taking absolutely hours, they weren't taking hours, so minutes, milliseconds to download. And it was like a case of how can I best optimize my CSS, how can I best optimize my JavaScript, and then it was like an Uglify program that you can use that took your JavaScript and reduced it down into these like funny jQuery style things. And so Webpack is basically this working inside of Node, and it works on top of Node, okay? And what it does is it says, hey, where is your website project? And you say, in this folder. And it can then have lots of loaders, which means that you can have like CSS loaders, TypeScript loaders, and other loaders where it will say, prior to me moving your file over to here to the actual distribution folder, it will pass it to all of these middlewares and they'll manipulate it. And then they'll pass it, they'll return it, and it will get passed to the next function, middleware, and that will then keep going and keep going. And then finally, it will save that file. And you'll tell Webpack how your project should be bundled and what type of middleware it should be using. Really cool stuff. And if you're going to create a website without React or something, then this is definitely the place to start, right? So if you wake up and go, I'm going to build a website today, Webpack, and well, you're going to go Node, Webpack, JavaScript, TypeScript, and then you're going to build it, all right? Nice and simple. And once you've been through this whole process, it is actually relatively simple. Okay, I want to get to the next point now, which is going to be possibly like a rude word to some people, and this is testing. You'll say it to some people, and I don't test my code. You must test your code. Is that if you're writing production code for other people, you've got to know that it's testable, especially if you're writing code for sensitive data. You've got to know it's tested, and you can't just write some. You've got to write producible, testable code that can be, every single time you make a change, you run that tests, and it will output to say whether or not your code still passes. Now, you don't hack your code so the tests pass. You should write the tests to force your code to do the right thing. And so one of the next things is that which one is Jasmine, and then I used well, let's just say Jasmine first of all. I used another one actually. Let me have a look. I used Jasmine before, but then I used another one. So JavaScript testing. Can't remember what it's called. Which one did I do? Webpack. That there, I believe. No. I can't remember the name of it. It will come to me. It's important one. Web tools. Used it with this. Mocha, yeah, that was it. Okay, so this is going to be the next one. Yeah, so I used Mocha. And Mocha fits in nicely. Mocha fits in nicely with Node, TypeScript, writing packages and stuff like that perfectly, because you can write your code and then it actively, whilst you're writing it, you'll see it. If you've got two screens, you'll see it running your tests all the time. You'll see like this green, 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 and then red, and it will tell you error is here. So this is now the next thing. If you do TypeScript, to then start and go to Mocha and Chai. So we want Chai, that was it. Chai, Mocha, JavaScript testing. Yes, right. So this is the next thing that you got to do. Now, Mocha and Chai. Right, so something came up there, is that Chai is a BDD, TDD, assertion library, blah, blah, blah. Right, BDD, behavior driven development. TDD, test driven development. These are key acronyms that you should learn, all right? And you should learn what's the difference between the two. You should also learn what's the difference between unit testing, functional testing, UI testing, and all of these terms that you'll hear from other people. So this is the next step. So I'm hoping, what is the trending technology for web developers currently? Well, I'm expressing here actively as a professional web developer what I would use today, right? And whether I would use it next week. And if anything, the best piece of technology that developers must be doing today, using today, is YouTube. Because, or YouTube, I don't want to say Twitter, but it's a place where you're going to be learning what other people are doing. And you've got to be like subscribing to different technologies so you stay up to date with what they're doing. Lots of conferences. Now, if you don't speak any English, you don't understand English very well, YouTube's great because it's got captions and it's done in lots of languages, and it's automated for, I believe, automated for people. I only ever see it in English, so, but I watch a lot of YouTube if I'm on the train and so on, and I just turn off the sound and I can just read the captions. So I'm going to put down on the end is that YouTube is there for a sake of learning and a resource of what's up to date and so on, to subscribe to things. Right, the next thing that we've got, which I don't think, okay, I was going to say machine learning, but the next thing that I believe is an absolute vital thing to learn is Firebase, is real-time databases. And this then takes you into the likes of sockets and HTTP2, where at the moment, to understand this, prior to, we used to have jQuery, we still have jQuery, but used to do an AJAX request, and then servers would do polling. So it means you would send a request, and Facebook chat did this initially. It'd send a request and the server would spin and wait and wait and wait and wait until it actually had something. And when it did have something, it then responded to the clients. And the client would wait till it got a timeout, or wait till it got a timeout and then run it again. And if it got something, the connection was closed, and as soon as they've handled the data, it would run the connection again, and it would keep this constant connection open with the server, which meant that you had this real-time way of pushing data to the client. We later got push notifications and web. I don't do them, web notifications and so on, which was fine. But then the likes of socket IO and socket programming. So you don't have to, if you want to understand what does Firebase do, well, Firebase uses its own kind of technologies, but a good understanding of how socket servers work and so on, what socket servers are, is come to socket IO, and this will give you a really good understanding of what socket IO does. And then you'll have a good understanding what Firebase does. And Firebase is completely real time, meaning that if you have, like, say 50 people all listening, all waiting for, let's say, me to write a message, and I send this data to the database at Firebase, and so I send it in one direction. Now, like an email blast, for example, would then go, give me a list of all the people that's there, send it to the first, send it to the second, send it to the third, etc., etc., until it got to the end. And then, so the last person in that queue would probably have to wait however many nanomilliseconds, don't know, microseconds, until they got the message. Because, yeah, but Firebase does it in another way, where it just then transmits, broadcasts, should we say, all this message to all sockets that are actively open, connected to this one database. It boff, sends them all at once. And so it means that everyone gets it exactly the same time, real time. So you can create a JavaScript application, a web application, and whilst you're typing into an input field, you can have another one on another device that is real time, showing exact, well, it might be a microsecond out, exact same time, the text here. And it has lots of Firebase rules and so on. You've got cloud functions, it's serverless. It's kind of a lot like, well, we got the next one on the list. We've got AWS, Amazon Web Services. You've got Google Engine, Google App Engine, Google Cloud Platform, I believe you've got to call it now, and also AWS, Amazon Web Services. So this is really also something that it should be on your to-know list. You don't have to use it, but you just need to know that it's there. And if a client comes and says, I want to have a serverless, scalable technology, So what does this word scalable mean? It means that so what does this word scalable mean? Well, as a web developer, you might create a web server. You might create a web server, and this handles all of your connections. And because you're a small company, you have, like, say, 100 requests per day, and none of them are actively at the same time. This server is going to you could actually probably switch it off at times and turn it on, because you know that there's only so many people looking at it. But what happens if you have the correct amount of request, or one more request than what this server can handle? This one person would then not get a response, and it can be this server would crash. So what you would want to happen is, automatically, when your server can't handle the next request, it then starts another server up to handle this. Granted, you've got round robins and all sorts of stuff like that that kind of do this, but you've got to maintain this. This is the thing. You as a server administrator now, so in the beginning you were a web developer, and then just suddenly you become a server administrator, which is just like amazing. You know, you wanted to be a web developer, and now you're a server administrator as well. So this is where you can abstract the server part of it into the likes of AWS or Firebase and so on, and they handle all of this. So scalability is that it will start up more servers for you if required, and it means it will balance out all of the requests. So every single request that you get is returned with near enough the same speed. And then you've also got then vertical scaling, which I don't know how to explain that actually, but you've got horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. But this, like I said, if you want to be a web developer, then this is server stuff, and you don't want to be dealing with these things. Okay, if you're going to step into the world of server-side programming, then you can do it with JavaScript. I've got people that would cringe at me for saying that they should do. No, actually, I would do it with JavaScript as option number one for server-side programming. But I've got this like person sat on my shoulder that's screaming at me, telling me, and it's actually a real person, telling me, no, you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it with JavaScript because of this, 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 and this, and this. And I would then go, okay, you're maybe correct. And he would say then, you should be using Symfony. Symfony. Okay, you should be using Symfony. So Symfony, as it says here, is a high performance. Didn't say it anymore. Anyway, Symfony is a PHP framework that kind of does all of this stuff for you. And yeah, this has so many packages and frameworks that it allows you to create a REST API really, really easy. Allows you to add MySQL or a database connection, and it has something called doctrine as well, which allows you to then connect to the database. Once again, this is talking about MySQL. You know, this is server administrator level stuff. Once again, as a web developer, you just need to learn how. You can read data from a MySQL database. You shouldn't, as a web developer, like be having the responsibility to actually administrate the database and where and which machine and which IP address it's on. So this is server administrator, it's not web developer. And understand this is if you're going to go into this field, then yes, you need to have a good understanding of how you could do it for your own testing, but yeah, that's it. Is you just should know how to use MySQL and retrieve data from it, but the actual administration of it, that should be a server administrator. So now to talk about this, we could also allow for other professionals that have been using all of these technologies, and they assist you with other packages, and this is called Docker. So if you're interested in using packages and servers without worrying about the administration of it, then I would suggest you start looking at Docker, because this really fills a hole here. And yeah, I don't really want to get too deep into Docker, but that's definitely on the list. But I watched a video and it was called container driven developments. And they said that you shouldn't use Docker anymore, you should use other stuff. And I'm not going to get into it because I actually wouldn't know how to describe it that well. Anyway, so can you see this pattern now? Is that it's a big area, and to say to go into web development, then it's a hefty old task today. Definitely if you're a newbie. If you're not a newbie and you're trying to work out what other people are using, well, I think I might have covered like maybe 10% of what you should be using and so on, and how you should be doing it. There's probably a whole bunch more other things. Okay, I can't finish the video without doing it. We also then have CI and CD. So there's continuous. I'll use Circle CI just for an example. So continuous integration, continuous deployment, is a way that you take your project that's testable and you then send it to a CI server, which will then test it and it will build it. And if it gets that far, it will then package it, and it will then say, hey, I have packaged something. And once something is packaged, it can then be created for a release. So you then have like a finished product. It doesn't have any of the test code in it anymore. It just has the raw files that are needed for your application. In this example, a website. And once that's done, then you need another thing that will then deploy it to the server where it should be located. And that's where it comes under the continuous development. Once again, this is a server administrator thing. The only thing that you really should need to understand is how you write the CI YAML files. Okay, so there's GitLab here, which GitLab is then like GitHub if you don't know about it, and it will teach you about what should go with inside of your YAML file and how you can administrate the CI server at any one given time. So when you update a branch on your GitHub repository or the Git repository, this script will get triggered and other things will get triggered, and you can do other things, install stuff and so on. So that's definitely something else to understand. Now, if you want to go into web development, you need to learn also how to use. No, we're not going to mobile development. Right, that's 1 hour now. I've said enough, and I want to eat some food. So I hope this has answered questions. I don't know. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you got all the way through to the end and you have been watching this, then thank you very much for watching. If it's now in the future, then please like and subscribe. Check that bell icon so you get notified of when new videos come out and so on. And that's it. So I bid you farewell. Bye then.